Today is November 7th, 2024, and this is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. One common question that I receive from students, but also from parents, I would say teenage students and younger parents, is how can the study of the classical liberal arts actually help young men and women in real life? How can the study of the classical liberal arts help us in real life? In real life. And when we use the phrase real life, what is normally meant is making a living. How does this actually help us? Why should we invest the time and effort, possibly even the money, in classical liberal arts studies when we're preparing for life in a high-tech, competitive, modern workplace? Now, what's interesting is that most people who talk to me, they know me to be a Catholic and a classicist. They know that's my full-time occupation, and that's all that I've ever done. From the time I was in college, my full-time work career has just been classical studies and teaching, going on 25 years now. So I think it's hard for teenage students and parents to look at me and think that I could help them in other occupations, in modern business or in the modern workplace. And it's really not true. In fact, I think when most people think about what I do for a living, they have a very inaccurate idea of what my life actually consists of. I'll admit that when I was in college, when I was 20 years old, let's say, I was interested in classical studies because I loved religion and I loved history and I was fascinated by the ancient world. And I wanted to spend my time visiting archaeological sites, studying ancient texts, visiting great libraries of the world, gathering and examining ancient study materials and so on. But very quickly I learned that that has much more to do with travel than it does with classical education. That's just leisure, that's just hobby time. That's not how the actual work of a classicist who is married with children, has a family to provide for. That's not how a classicist lives. A classicist has to do business. And therefore, everything that anyone else needs to learn in order to work in the marketplace, a man has to learn to devote his life to classical studies and teaching and writing and research and things like that. So it all comes down to understanding the market, learning all of the important skills of business. All of it has to be learned. To give a good example, my kids in the military, they admire very much the chaplains in the military. And so my kids grow up in the Catholic Church. They meet priests and religious, and they're not very impressed by most of the priests and religious that they meet. But when they get into the military, they tell me that the chaplains are some of the most impressive men they've ever met in their lives. And they give me the reason why they feel so attracted, so impressed by these military chaplains. And the reason why is because the military chaplains, they're not allowed to just go and study religion and then show up in the military and do their religious thing, talk about religion, maybe administer the sacraments, and then disappear. Chaplains in the military are soldiers. Chaplains in the military are soldiers whose occupation in the military is to provide spiritual pastoral care to the soldiers, but they are all trained as soldiers. They go through basic training, they jump out of planes, they shoot guns, they receive all of the training that all the other soldiers receive. They've got to make it through all the levels of development and training. They've got to take physical training tests and so on. And the kids in the military get to see them in their role as the chaplain, but then they also get to see them in their role as the soldier. And for my kids, that has been something that has been very impressive. When it comes to my occupation, to classical studies and research and teaching, most people see the classicist side of things. They receive benefits from my work as a classicist. They talk to me as talking to a classicist and so on. But they don't see, that's really like the tip of the iceberg of my life's work. And what they don't see is the rest of that iceberg under the surface of the water, which is what makes my life as a classicist possible. There's a saying, you may hear me say this quite a bit, there's a saying that a wise man or a philosopher can always find $1. And, this is common sense if you think about it, because if a man claims to study wisdom, if a man claims to study nobler, higher things than the gossip of the common people, shouldn't that man be able to figure out how to do the stuff the common people do? Shouldn't the wise man be able to figure out how to do the work of the common people? And obviously the answer is yes. As I mentioned before, one of the reasons I say that many young adults are unimpressed by priests in the church or religious is that they don't see that. They don't see that these religious men are highly skilled people. They don't see them as being dynamic personalities with lots of skills and talents. They often see them as being introverts and social misfits. And so they have this feeling that this man chose to be a monk because no girls liked him or because he had no other option. When my wife and I entered the church back in 2005, when we were going through RCIA, one of the activities of RCIA was to have a tour of the church. And as we were going through, we were standing in front of the altar, and my wife and I were with our parish priest, and he was an Augustinian monk. And so we were excited to talk to him and learn about his life. We were excited to learn about his background and education and how he became a priest. So my wife, all excited and eager to talk to him, asked him, what led you to become a priest? What led you to become a priest? And his answer was precisely this. He said, well, I couldn't do anything else. And so someone told me, hey, you should consider becoming a priest. And so I did. That was his answer for why he became a priest. Now, when it's said, it may be said with a chuckle, but the problem is when we begin to see priests and teachers and religious leaders as people who are doing what they're doing because they couldn't do anything else, it has a real negative effect on our ability to entrust ourselves to their counsel, to their teaching, and so on. It's not a good thing. If we read the qualifications for ministry that St. Paul wrote in the New Testament epistles, it's worth noting that one of the qualifications he mentioned of a religious leader is that he's respected by those outside the church. He is able to teach, and so on. So it's not funny to have the church with a large number of men in the ministry who are not respected outside of the church, who are not able to teach, and so on. But you can see that we look at someone and we understand they have a specialization, but we want to know that they also have the general skills, the everyday skills, the real world skills. And when we see someone who has the real world skills and a specialization, that's usually a successful person. And so in my case, the classical studies and teaching and things like that's the tip of the iceberg. But I spend most of my time doing the regular stuff of the modern market, the regular stuff of business. I have to think about marketing. I have to think about sales. I have to think about budgeting. I have to think about programming and the development of technology. And even though my studies, much of the subject of what I study and work on is ancient and doesn't change, every other aspect of the work that I do is constantly changing. And I had to learn the hard way early on that if I didn't get a handle of technology and all of the different skills of the modern workplace, I was going to do a lot of work for nothing. Just as an example, when I first started the CLA, I developed a geography course that everyone loved. And it was cool because it was an old geography text that had really great lessons, and I built it and linked it into Microsoft's 3D mapping software, which was available online at the time. I forget exactly what it was called, but it was just fascinating. We would go through the lesson, and then anytime that there was a place name listed or some geographical feature listed in the lesson, I would supply a link, and the kids could just hit the link, hop into Microsoft, whatever the mapping program was that they had, and check it out. Could move around and fly around. You know, we know this now with Google Earth, but originally back in 2008, 2009, it was a Microsoft mapping program that was the innovator. And I had our ancient geography course mapped into Microsoft's mapping, 3D mapping. And it was awesome. Everyone loved the course. It was very successful. And then all of a sudden, we got an email from Microsoft telling us that they were closing down their mapping program. And within a very short period of time, the whole thing was shut down. The whole project was shut down. And I had this developed geography program that was now useless. And so I learned very quickly that when I do these things, I've got to be sort of ahead of the game in terms of being able to look ahead and see where technology is going, or I'm going to spend a lot of time doing stuff that ends up getting erased anytime that a tech company chooses to close down a program. And we've seen this a couple times. Another example, petty school videos that I made, which were very, very popular. I made probably 60 or 70 videos, I would say, for young preschool age students, preparing them for classical grammar. And all of those videos were produced with a software called Adobe Flash. They were beautiful interactive videos that the kids really loved. And then a few years back, it was announced that, well, really it was Steve Jobs actually complained about Adobe Flash way back. And there were rumors that it was going to be discontinued and no longer supported. And I didn't know about that, wasn't paying attention to technology at the time. And so I developed that whole petty school course, or 3 courses, and then the internet all together in unison decided that they were no longer going to support Adobe Flash, and the browsers wouldn't play Flash videos. So all of those videos were unusable. My wife had to actually screen record them as she played them and upload the screen recordings to YouTube to save them before they became just completely useless. But 2 examples of how work that's done in education can't be done in ignorance of what is going on in the tech world or in the business world and so on. So anyway, I spend almost all of my time during the day doing work in the business world, in the technology world, in the market, and so on. And my classical studies are like the ice cream, or the cherry on top of the ice cream, I should say. I get to work on classical stuff when all of the other stuff is taken care of. I never intended or planned that, but that's really how my life works. And I think for anyone who is interested in any field, that's how it's going to work, especially in modern times, especially in the artificial intelligence generation, where this is going to be even more true, where domain experts or experts in different fields are going to be able to do things directly with the help of artificial intelligence, and those who had supporting roles in past generations are going to be out of work. So it's even more important that as we pursue expertise in our fields, we learn to use these tools, because that's where the market is headed. So anyway, what I would like to talk about today is a reflection that I've had recently, because I've been giving a lot of attention to the work of sales and marketing and business. And I've noticed an interesting parallel between the sales process in business and principles of classical rhetoric. And I'd like to take some time to talk about this comparison that I've been thinking about between what anyone today who works in sales, and I mean, how can you not understand sales if you're going to get into any kind of business? But the understanding that men have who work in sales of the sales process and how the work of salesmen is performed, which is very important for business. It seems like it just comes out of nowhere. It seems like it just, was invented by modern businessmen and salesmen. It seems like it's a modern thing, and we just go to these business conferences or read business books about how to be a better salesman and how to improve your sales and all this kind of stuff. It seems like a modern thing. But as I was recently reading through some an article on sales and marketing, I said, man, this sounds just like Ciceronian oratory. This sounds just like the concept that Cicero explained in his rhetorical work that's titled De Inventione, or On the Art of Invention. And so I started to think about it, and I actually pulled out a copy of Cicero's work on invention, and just to refresh my memory, was flipping through it and was thinking, holy mackerel, I could probably develop a guide to sales and marketing drawn directly from the rhetorical work of the ancient Roman Cicero, because it's really the same thing. And so I'd like to share, and this is just off the top of my head here. I haven't worked on this at all or written anything out. I have no notes prepared or anything like that. But this is just a raw overview of what I've been thinking, because I think it'll be interesting. For those of you who may work in sales, you'll be familiar with the sales concepts. And if you've had any chance to study ancient rhetoric, you'll be familiar with the rhetorical ideas, maybe. Even if you've taken courses in writing, where you've learned how to write essays and things like that, all of this stuff comes down to the art of rhetoric. We unfortunately don't study it in modern circles, but if we would, I think we'd have a lot of insights that our competitors and others in our fields don't have, and it could be a real advantage for us, a competitive advantage in business, which, as a former athlete who's always been very competitive, I really enjoy. I think the competition in the market is actually healthy and good for us. But I'd like to share this a little bit. So let me start with modern sales. In modern sales, there is what's known as the sales process. And there are a number of stages that sales and marketing experts work through as they try and sell their products or services for the companies that they work for, whether they're self-employed or whether they're working for a larger corporation. There's a sales process. Some call it the funnel, some call it the pipeline. But it's this idea that there are different stages, and we can take a customer or a potential customer from the beginning of this pipeline and lead them step by step to the end, which would be the final sale. We've all experienced this as shoppers. If you go to the car dealership, for example, as soon as you walk in, you'll be greeted by a salesperson, and he'll immediately begin leading you into this sales pipeline, which salesmen are trained to do. And it's actually very helpful. It may be annoying, especially if it's done badly, but it's very helpful in business because it provides short-term goals and allows a business to really streamline the work that it does to lead people from one step to the next. But the first step of the sales process is called prospecting. And what this means is a business who has a product or service to sell just begins to try and make people aware of the business, aware of the products and services, and invite those who it comes into contact with to provide some feedback, to get in touch, and so on. So if you go to a website, you'll notice that a website, even the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, will have usually some sort of special offer, like the free book that we offer. We do that to make connections with people who are finding us through Google searches, coming to the website because we want to help them, but we can't help them until we begin to communicate with them and develop a relationship. So we want to help to start that relationship by making an offer of a product like our free book on education. And what we get in exchange for this special offer is we get their contact information. And then I'm able to send them an email and write and say, hello, I'm so-and-so, I'm the headmaster of the program. I'd love to know what you're looking for, what brought you to our website. People don't just stumble on the Classical Liberal Arts Academy website. So I'd like to know what you're looking for. Are you an adult looking for studies for yourself? Are you a parent trying to provide for the education of your children? Share some of your concerns, questions with me, and I'll do my best to help you because that's what I do. I work in education. So that process where we just begin to share information, talks that I publish on YouTube, articles that I write, on and on, all of this activity is done to make people aware of the work that we do in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, the products and services and resources that are available. And we try to lead them to contact us so that we can begin a relationship. And that work is called prospecting, where you're just trying to make your product or your business known and begin to initiate contacts. Now, once we get some contact, and this could come from many different places, once we start to get some responses to these things, we then enter into the second phase, which is called qualification. We try to figure out whether this person who we're in contact with is a person who can actually benefit from the products and services that we offer, whether it's someone who we might actually be able to help and work with, whether we're what they're looking for, whether we would be a good fit for them. And we try to figure that out through some initial discussions, asking about their goals, their principles, what they're looking for, speaking with them a little bit, seeing what their personalities are like, considering financial issues, whether they even could do the things that they say they would like to do or whether they're not realistic. Because while we're looking to qualify these contacts, we're also considering trying to disqualify those whom we don't want to work with. It was funny when I started the CLAA, I had a very clear vision for what I wanted to do in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. So when I would write articles or do talks, um, they would be very intentionally not divisive, not that I wanted to divide people, but I clearly wanted to identify certain people and separate them from the rest of the people, because I knew that the work that I do is not popular, it's not attractive to most people, and I just want to separate those people from the people who might actually be interested. So I would write articles and things like that, and I remember I would get criticized by homeschool mothers and parents who read things that I wrote, because they would say, for a classicist, you don't seem to understand rhetoric very well, because maybe if you would have done this or said this, you might have earned my business. And you see how the customers, when they don't understand, they think that the qualification process is all about the business owners trying to get them to sign up. The idea that the customer is always right. But really, in responsible business, qualification works both ways. The consumer is trying to qualify the business, but the business is also qualifying and disqualifying consumers. So I was often criticized for turning people away or turning people off to the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and they would mock and criticize my rhetorical skill, not understanding that their response was exactly what those articles and talks were intended to produce. And so this second phase of qualification goes in both directions. It's us trying to gain the trust and interest of consumers, or of prospects, we could say. It's also for us to qualify potential customers and decide whether or not we want to work with certain people. So it goes both directions. But that's the second phase of the sales process, qualifications. Then we move into the third phase. So now we've identified someone who we're interested in as a business, and they've also begun to pursue us as a business that they're interested in. So we can see this relationship developing, and this is called a sales opportunity, or some refer to it as a deal. We look at them as a contact that qualifies for what we offer. And so now our goal is to help them learn about what that opportunity is that we offer and lead them to get enrolled and get to work. So this third stage is a stage where we begin to share information about our products and services. We provide a sample account where they can check things out. Now that they're really getting interested, they can sign into the study center, look around, see things, see sample lessons, see sample courses and study materials. I offer to have consultation meetings with people at this stage to see if they would like to talk about the details of our program, and I can give them, from my experience, recommendations for how that they can make good use of what we offer and achieve their goals, which they share with me. And this is called the consultation or the demo phase of the sales process, where we're really starting to get into the details now of what our relationship would look like and what options are available for this prospect, for this customer. And then when we start to get things really clear, we then move to the next phase, which is where we, the business side, present them with a proposal or an offer. We present them with the opportunity that's we consider to be most in line with what they're seeking. So, for example, I would say, I think that since you've got 5 children you're concerned with and you're looking for this, you don't need this help. You're not interested in this service. I think the family plan would be best for you, and that costs $100 a month or $1,000 for a year. So that's my recommendation for you. That's what I advise you to do, to enroll in the family plan. That would be the next phase, the proposal phase, the fourth phase. And once I've made the proposal and have explained to the customer what I would recommend for them, they then have the opportunity to respond, and they can say, well, no, I actually, we do want on-demand grading, and we would like to be able to have the kids chat with their teachers and things like that. So if that's in the premium plan, we'd like to be able to have them study under the premium plan. So we may adjust our proposal and say, fine, that's no problem. You can, you're welcome to enroll in a higher program. And then they may say, however, the price, because this is $250 a month, that's a little too much for us. So we're wondering if you could possibly offer, do you have financial aid or anything like that? And so then we enter into the next phase, which is negotiation. We try to work out a deal between us, work out the details of what our relationship is going to be. That's the next phase. And so we go back and forth discussing what's possible and not possible. Sometimes we can offer discounts. There's some services we can't offer discounts for. And so we've got to figure out what could actually work. And both of us have to compromise in some ways to find an agreement. And then finally, if we find something we agree on and they're satisfied and we're satisfied, they then have the opportunity to commit, and we close the deal. And so this is the closing or the commitment phase. And then, so they make their decision to commit, or in the worst case scenario, they choose to do something else and they choose to walk. So that step-by-step process is the sales process. That's the sales pipeline. And it's very well established in business, in marketing, that's how the sales process more or less works. Now, every business, because it has different products, different services, different prices, all of these different things, the details of those stages will differ, but the general principle of that pipeline is pretty universal. And so we see it's something of an art of sales. It's an art. It's something that can be studied and practiced in many different circumstances. It's an art, the art of marketing and sales. So it's very helpful. So again, I was reading an article on the sales process for a peculiar interest that I had, that I was thinking about. And as I was going through this, I just kept feeling like, where have I seen this before? Where this just feels familiar. Something about this feels like I've studied something like this before. And then it struck me. I said, this is just like, it's almost a parallel with Cicero's teaching, or really any ancient rhetorician, Aristotle as well, teaching on the parts of an oration. And the more I started to think about it, I started to realize, like, yeah, these really do. These two things really do align. And so this is not some artificial strategy or some, seven tricks to make people buy your stuff. This is just an example of the principles of rhetoric being applied in a modern application, or in a modern set of circumstances. And so, as I said, I grabbed a copy of Cicero's work on invention, and I found the place where he introduces the parts of an oration. And when he lists the parts of an oration is a speech. He says that there are 6 parts, and he gives them these names: exordium, narrative, partition, confirmation, refutation, and peroration. And I'll talk about them in a minute. But if you think about Cicero's view of the work of the rhetorician, the way that Cicero thinks about it, for him, there were a number of different applications of where the art of rhetoric was practiced. One was in the courtroom. Cicero was a lawyer, and so he had to argue with judge and jury against an opponent in a courtroom. And so when he thought about the oration, it was really the argument of the lawyer, of the advocate in a courtroom. And he would think about the different parts of the speech and the different goals and objectives that needed to be fulfilled so that the case could be won. So that was one application of the art of rhetoric in arguing court cases. There was also a political application where you're dealing with developing democracies, even in the ancient Roman Republic, and the need to speak to the people, the need to persuade and marshal the support of the people became increasingly important, and that led to an increasing focus on the art of rhetoric, because just as a lawyer had to argue in court to win the judgment of the jury, so a politician had to argue in the public square and try and win the support of the people. So there was a judicial application of rhetoric, there was a political application of rhetoric, and then there were other minor applications. And we can imagine, especially in our society, maybe not in Roman society, but in modern capitalistic free market society, the art of rhetoric applies in the work of persuading customers to support one's product. And while Cicero doesn't talk about this, the parallels are very clear. And I can see that what's understood as the modern sales and marketing process is really nothing but the principles of the art of rhetoric being applied to the modern free market. And so I'd like to walk through Cicero's teaching on the parts of oratory real quick and make a comparison, and we'll see what you think. So the first part, he says, is the exordium. And he says in this work on invention, I just happen to have this one passage in front of me here. He says, an exordium is a passage which brings the mind of the hearer into a proper condition to receive the rest of the speech. This is accomplished if the hearer becomes well disposed, attentive, and receptive. So the purpose of the exordium, the first part of a speech according to the art of rhetoric, is to dispose the hearer to the rest of the message or to the argument that's about to be presented. Now, it's very clear that this aligns with the first part or maybe two parts of the sales process, which is prospecting and qualifying leads. If you think about it, prospecting is achieved by basically introducing yourself or introducing your business to the market and seeking through your marketing to present yourself to the market in a way that causes the hearers to become, quote, well-disposed, attentive, and receptive. The purpose of marketing is exactly the purpose that Cicero mentions when he speaks of the exordium in a classical speech or oration. So we can see how that the exordium includes this work of prospecting. I would say that it also includes the work of the second step, which is qualifying, because it's seeking to figure out and to cultivate in the people, in the hearers, a readiness or a disposition to go along with what's to follow, that there may be a successful outcome. And that's the purpose of qualifying leads. It's preparing the audience for what's coming, getting them ready and sort of, discerning like who in the audience are you seeking to persuade and who in the audience do you know you're not going to persuade. So you don't waste any time with them. You already know that they're not going to be persuaded. Donald Trump during his campaign didn't spend any time in California, did he? He didn't spend any time in Massachusetts because he already knows that audience. He didn't spend much time in modern cities, but he did spend time in suburban areas and in rural areas because that's where his prospects are. And so we can see how that work of prospecting and lead qualifying relates to the exordium of the classical oration. So that's the first part. The second part is called the narrative in Cicero's work, the narrative. And in the narrative, basically, and again, this makes clearest sense in the context of the courtroom. The narrative is basically where a lawyer presents his side of the story. What happened on that day. The lawyer oversees or even delivers the narration of the events of that day. And we can imagine that there would be two sides to every story, so there'd be conflicting details in the narratives, and the credibility of a narrative and how it resounds with the jurors is an important part of the work of the orator, or how it resounds with the people in a political context, or how it resounds with the market, with the potential customers in a business circumstance. So we can see how this part, the narrative, is where the story is presented. Now, if you follow any modern marketing, any great marketing teachers like Seth Godin, what you'll notice is they teach business owners to market potential customers by means of telling their story. Seth Godin, I think his last name is pronounced Godin. It's Godin. He teaches this idea of finding your prospective customers by telling stories that show who you are and what kind of things you do, so that a message can be presented that says, we are people who do things like this. And there are people out in the market who say, hey, I'm also a person who does things like that. And that's how that connection in marketing is made. And he gives a good example of this in the advertising of Nike. If you think about Nike, if you see a Nike commercial, Nike doesn't talk about Nike in its commercials. There isn't much talk at all. Normally what Nike will show is some beautiful person, some athlete, exercising, running, participating in some sort of sport. And anyone watching will say, that's like me. That's the sport I play. That's the way I play. People like us do things like this. And Nike says, yeah, and people like us who do things like this wear Nike apparel. And they don't even need to say that. They simply need to show that. And so we get an image either in a catalog or a magazine or on a commercial. We see someone doing the things that we do, and we see them wearing Nike apparel, and that leads us to say, I could use some new shorts or some new shoes or a new shirt. I'm going to get myself a Nike shirt because people like us do things like this, and this is how we dress. And so it's by telling the story that a business reveals its character and its goals and its likes and dislikes to the audience, and that attracts people who see the same things, who have the same experiences, and so on. And they can tell the genuineness of the business by their narrative, by the story that they tell. And so it establishes a relationship between the business and the customer or the prospective customer. So, for example, in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, my book, Understanding Classical Catholic Education, has been very influential in leading hundreds and hundreds of people to study with us, because when they read that book, when they read my narrative, they allow me to tell the story of what I believe is wrong with education and how things happened and developed the way they have. As they read my narrative, they say, this is what I think. This is exactly what I believe has happened. This is where I think modern education is. And while I, the prospective customer, I know there's something wrong, but I don't necessarily know what's wrong, and I don't know how to fix what's wrong. The purpose of this business, what this business is saying is, we do know what's wrong, and we can help you to fix it. And you see how the narrative really leads to the next step. which is to say, you know what? We accept your narrative. We agree with your narrative. We agree on the problem, and we want to know what the solution is, and that's the next part of the sales process. So this second part of the classical oration, which is the narrative or the narration, tells the story, explains what happened, what's going on, what the history is, what's led to the current situation, what's led to the current problem, what exactly happened, because much of the solution lies in the narrative of what's gone wrong or what's happened. So we can see a parallel there between the narrative and the third part of the sales process, which is the proposal, where we get to show someone what's gone wrong and how we can fix that problem. So there's an interesting parallel there. Next up in the classical oration is called the partition. The partition. And this again relates, I think, to the proposal or to the demo, as we mentioned before, even consultation, those middle bridge stages of the sales process where someone really moves from a prospect to a promising new customer. In the partition, the speaker, according to Cicero, should lay out the arguments that he's going to make, basically lay out the main points of his case to let the audience know that, hey, you know what? I've got a solution to this problem, and I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to prove it to you in what follows, but here are my main points. And so in the partition, the orator lays out the main points of his case and what he's going to work to prove in what's to follow. Now this, as I said, is like the demo or the consultation part, because we show, here's what the modern educational world has done. Here's what's happened to them and how they've gone off course. Here's what we do. Here's what you can do. Here's what we're going to do together. Let us give you a demo. Let's have a consultation meeting, and I can share with you an outline of how enrolling with us in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy can help you to achieve your goal or solve this problem that we've discussed and agree on. So we can see how the partition of the classical oration aligns with the demo / consultation / proposal part of the sales process. After the partition in the classical oration, the next part is called the confirmation. The confirmation is the part of the oration where the speaker presents his positive proofs. That is, he proves the truth of his position. He proves the truth of his case. The politician proves why you should vote for him for positive reasons, the arguments why he should be the president, why he should be the senator, and so on. And so we argue in the sales process why we should be the program or the business that you choose to work with. We make our case for why you should choose us positively. That's the confirmation of classical oratory. The next part of the classical oration is the opposite of that, which is refutation. So if there are objections raised, if someone says, well, I like your program and it seems like your prices are pretty good, but you don't have colored books. You don't have books with lots of color in them, which is what a mother one time told me. They didn't like our program because there was no colored pages in the books. So someone can raise an objection to our program, and then in the next part, the refutation, I would have the opportunity to refute that and to explain why I don't think that should hinder them from joining us if they're qualified to do so. And I have a chance to respond to objections that they have made to my confirmation, to my sales pitch, my proposal. And this is similar in the sales process to negotiation. You can see that there's a back and forth. There's a discussion of the pros and cons. There are discussions of what the customer likes, what the customer doesn't like, what the customer wants to do, what the business wants to do. And there's this back and forth negotiation, which is really like the refutation of the classical oration. And then lastly, the sales process comes to an end, and we've got the commitment, we've got the closing, deal or no deal. Are you going to commit with us, sign a contract, enroll, whatever, buy our product? Are you going to join us in this and agree to work with us? Or are you going to walk away and say, no, thanks, I'm going someplace else? And in the same way, in the classical oration, we've got what's called the peroratio, or the peroration, which is the conclusion of the message. And so the orator makes his final pitch, summarizes the arguments that he's made, tries to really pound everything into the memory of his audience members, and then, having established all of the proofs, gone through the logic of his case, in the peroratio, he makes an emotional appeal. He tries to move the audience emotionally to either, and there's two different outcomes that are desirable for the speaker. One is to make the audience hate the opponent. That's one option. We see that in politics today. Like Kamala Harris tried to run on a campaign where she just constantly criticized Donald Trump and hoped that hatred for Donald Trump would cause people to vote for her, even though she was just sort of a blank sheet of paper. She thought, you know what, I'm not going to try to argue that people should vote for me to be president for positive reasons, because there are none. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to show people that they should vote for me simply because a vote for me is a vote against Donald Trump. And she tried that. And she'd be asked a question, and she would actually answer every question she was asked by talking about bad things Donald Trump has done. And she tried that. You can see the strategy there was she had no hope in winning people's confidence in her. So she tried to get people to vote for her simply to oppose Donald Trump. So one of the goals of the peroration, Cicero says, is to arouse hatred for the opponent, indignation, he says, against the opponent for the sake of one's own case. And the second goal would be to positively cause the audience to want to join our side, to cause them to want to side with us, to actually attract them, to delight them, to please them, and cause them to feel that we're the right side and to join us. So we can see that's done in the conclusion, and that's what's done in the closing of the sales process, where we've done all the talking, we've made all the arguments, we've given the narrative, we've made the comparisons, we've gone through the demo, we've had a consultation, we've made our proposal, we've heard responses to our proposal, we've negotiated back and forth, we've made some compromises, there's nothing else for us to do. We've come to the end, and it's time for you to make your decision. What's it going to be? Are you going to use these other terrible programs? Are you going to work with these other terrible businesses, these disrespectable, good-for-nothing businesses over there? Are you going to go side with them and do your business with them? Or are you going to come with us, the good guys who are doing everything right, with the good prices, the nice people, the better products, the good morals, and so on? Are you going to join us and side and come to our side? Is this going to close with a win or a loss in sales term? That's exactly what was done in the peroration, in the classical oration. So that's it. We've gone through these two things, and I think you can see, even though it's not an exact alignment, I think you can see that what most people are talking about today in modern business circles when they talk about the sales process, it's really nothing other than the art of rhetoric applied to a different context. It's really just rhetoric. And what I would say is that if modern businessmen or modern, let's say, college students interested in becoming salesmen and businessmen, studying business, if they really wanted to gain an upper hand in the work of marketing and sales, You know where they should go to learn these things? Where they should go to really learn the wisdom of this art of sales? They should go to Cicero. That's really where they should go. They should go study ancient rhetoric, because Cicero and Aristotle and other famous ancient rhetoricians are much, much wiser than modern authors. And if they go back to Cicero, if you go back to Cicero's work on invention, and if you read, Cicero goes into all the details of these different parts of an oration. He explains the goals of each part. He explains the appropriate subjects for each part. He explains the means of leading people to one's position in each part. And Cicero is one of the greatest orators, the greatest rhetoricians in world history. And so when we ask the question, how would the study of the classical liberal arts help us in real life? If real life means sales and marketing, which it certainly does, if real life means sales and marketing, then you should understand that sales and marketing is nothing more than rhetoric. It's just the art of rhetoric. And you'd be much better off preparing for a career in sales and marketing, or learning about sales and marketing for use in your own business, by studying the ancient rhetoricians, because they teach the art in a way that no modern writers can teach it. So I think that provides a very clear example of how classical studies can help us to prepare for real life, help us with modern applications. Pretty clear. I mean, I don't know what else there is to say. The alignment is pretty clear. The usefulness of these things is pretty obvious. And again, you're going to have to choose between some modern author and someone like Cicero, a historical giant in philosophy, in communication, in the liberal arts, and so on. And you're going to find that when you read the writings of Cicero, they're so rich, full of such profound wisdom. He is a man of such unrivaled experience in these things. You know, one of the most influential men, maybe the most influential man in the Roman Republic before the founding of the empire, Cicero. You have him who can teach you how to move an audience and how to sell your product, or you can go read, some goober publishing ebooks like me in the modern market. There's no question that Cicero should be the choice. And that's an example of how ancient classical liberal arts studies can help us in modern real life. It's just one application. There are many more. So anyway, we're already closing in on an hour here. I want to wrap this up. I hope that's helpful. If there's anything that I've talked about, and again, these aren't scripted lessons or anything like that, just thoughts that I like to share to provoke discussion, which for those of you who listen, you'll know that it quite often succeeds in helping us to do that. I hope that these are helpful. And if you've got any questions, anything in here you find interesting that you'd like to follow up on and talk about, just get in touch. My email is wcm@classicalliberalarts.com. You can also comment on the YouTube videos in the comments section. I try to read everything and reply as often as I can. But anyway, I hope that's helpful. So let's get studying classical rhetoric, huh? God bless.